It's such a pleasure for us to be here. I was asked today by one of the teachers, have you been to Switzerland often or how many times? And I indicated that I did study abroad. I'm a full scholarship student. I'm the oldest of 6 children in my family and went to college on academic scholarships. But I managed to get a semester abroad in 1972. When I studied in London School of Economics, and I had very limited funds, but when we talked about where we wanted to go, some of my friends wanted to go to Paris, and some of my friends wanted to go to Italy, and I wanted to come to Switzerland. So in 1972, I made my first pilgrimage here, and we've been back many, many times. I love your country. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I think everything works well here, unlike what's currently happening in our country, but this is not a political discussion.
Well, we'd be glad to send him to you if you want your government growing in a hurry.
But we are delighted to be here and so happy to have the chance to work with Diego, who is a pioneer in Switzerland. We've worked with other countries and other pioneers that are trying to do something very different. I think what we can try to do today, if you're a parent of a student here, is to kind of reassure you that the approach that's being used here results in happy, smart, talented young people who find their passions, go on to competitive colleges, and do extraordinarily well in their lives. We have over 4 decades of research to show you that. And if you're here as an educator, to kind of introduce you a little bit, if you've not heard about our work, which is used in a number of places in Switzerland. So we've been working together since the mid-1970s. Joe and I are a husband and wife team. I like to say that because we're together all the time, and we have different last names. So people often ask, how did you meet, and are you friends? Well, we've been a husband and wife team, and we've generally gotten along pretty well for the 40 years that we've been married.
39 and a half.
Happy. And so SEM is implemented all over the world. We don't charge or license for it. We give away almost everything that we've done on our website, so we don't always know if SEM is being implemented with fidelity until we've come to visit. And so we've had a wonderful visit at this school and are very excited about what we've seen. Tonight we're going to introduce a little bit about the model. As I mentioned, we've had 47 years now of research and development. We'll talk a little bit about some of the research on the model, but if you're interested, we'd be delighted to send you or to provide to the school a couple of articles that summarize research. A lot of it not done by us, which is good. It's been done by other people about our work. Much of it done in the US, but a lot of it done in other countries, including Switzerland. We have colleagues in Basel that have been studying SEM. Victor, who unfortunately passed away, Victor Mueller and Salome, and she may actually be here tonight, a scholar and researcher in Basel. But we've also have colleagues in Italy and Holland. In fact, one of our most interesting studies done on SEM has been a longitudinal study done in Holland of 3 decades after students actually were implemented put into an SEM school, 2 or 3 schools. What happened to them, what kinds of jobs, what kinds of colleges, what kinds of incomes they have. So we can direct you to a good bit of research if you're interested. And this is the most recent summary model of Schoolwide Enrichment Model. So I think it's probably good to just start off with just a little bit of the pedagogy of this approach. You want to?
Yeah. I can summarize my feelings about school tomorrow by any of you raise your hands and take our 3 grandchildren into your home. We could love to have them come to school tomorrow. Anyway, this is a sort of an overview that we begin most presentations with, and all learning exists on a continuum from deductive, didactic, and prescriptive. That's information giving and test giving on the left, to investigative and inquiry oriented on the right. And that's really where our focus in the school-wide enrichment model is. We have nothing against children learning lots and lots of information, but as I'm fond of saying, information has no value unless it's used for something, unless it's put into something. And so our goals are in the lower right-hand corner of this diagram. We're hoping to produce the change makers of tomorrow, people who invent things, who do artistic work, who start businesses, and who hopefully do some things that will make any place that they work. It's not necessarily for all mankind, but it may be, but any place they work that will make the world a better place. A very, very big objective, but we believe that the right kind of education is what does that for young people.
We're very interested in creating a bigger pool of high creative individuals, people that not only find their area of interest, but know what to do with it. So we believe that the major goal of talent development, gifted education, is increasing the reservoir of highly creative individuals who use their talents, as Joe said, to make the world a better place. So, we believe we need more artists, we need more historians, more engineers, more lawyers, more actors, everybody in all fields we think that can be more creative and work in areas that they love. When we study individuals that have been the most successful, high-level talent development in the United States, which we have for decades now, we find the happiest people are the ones that have found work that they love. And so a huge part of what we try to do in school-wide enrichment model programs is develop interests. In fact, hi, this is our friend that we mentioned from Basel, Salome Mueller, who's done research on the SEM for a long time, and some of you may want to chat with her. I just talked about you. And she's coming from a big event today. But when we study individuals in the U.S. that have been the most talented and the most successful, oftentimes what we look for in their lives and we ask them about is how they became interested in what they do. And when we trace that back, it's almost always a childhood event. It's a lecture they attended, a field trip they went on, a project that they were able to do. When you ask students about the things they enjoy most in school that led to the development of a very successful career in life, it's almost always relative to somebody that's taken the time to pursue an interest. So here's the interesting thing, fascinating thing. Interests change, but the capacity to develop and stay with an interest is what manifests itself later on in adult creative productivity. So show me a child who's an avid collector. Show me a child that you may have, some of you may have kids that are really difficult to deal with because they want to ask you 1,000 questions. Show me a child like that, and I'll show you a child that's going to be a potential creative producer in the future. So it's a capacity to have an interest and pursue an interest. It's the collectors. It's the kids that drive you crazy. We took our granddaughter, we have a 7-year-old granddaughter, to see a retired nuclear submarine this summer. I almost regretted it after we went because for the next 2 months, all she wanted, it's a little girl, she doesn't really like dolls very much, but all she wanted to do is watch videos about submarines. Then we got into ships. How many people go on ships? What kind of ships are there? What about big ships? What about mammoth ships? By the end of the summer, I was like, let's just talk about something else. I mean, this is the way the creative mind develops. And that's what they're trying to do in the school. Expose youngsters to things they may have an interest in, and then let them pursue them in more depth. And this is a very large part of the work that we've done over the years, integrates what's now being called 21st century skills. Executive function, we talked a lot about this with teachers, the teachers here this afternoon. Executive function, starting a project, planning a project. I was the vice provost for academic affairs at the University of Connecticut for 7 years. That's the highest academic office. The University of Connecticut has 35,000 students, undergrad and graduate. And I can tell you the most successful professors are those with strong executive function. You can plan, you can carry out, you can identify steps, you can evaluate what works and what doesn't. These are some of the most important skills we can teach children, and these oftentimes are done as applied to projects or work that children do. So you will find in a school that uses SEM, creativity training, critical thinking, problem solving is a very big thing, executive function, planning, carrying out, communication, collaboration. These are the skills that now research tells educators are some of the most important things that we can develop. It's not necessarily learning more knowledge, because we can access knowledge instantly, almost, with our phones and our computers. It's what to do with the knowledge, how to use it, how to adapt it. And that's what we've been focusing on in the US. It's changed a lot. We got asked this afternoon, are college admissions changing in the US? And the answer is yes. Many colleges are asking for a portfolio of students' work. Engineering colleges are looking for projects. I mean, the Ivy Leagues still want top grades, top scores, but they also want plus a project, plus a portfolio, plus something creative that the students have done. And so that's a little bit of the background behind the development of the Schoolwide Enrichment Model. A lot of this is based on Joe's work from the mid-1970s and developing forward for the last 45 years. It's a different brand of learning, and there are three major services in the model that we'll talk about briefly tonight. The first is we look at kids' strengths. What are their interests? What are the kinds of products that they like to do? What are the kinds of ways they like to learn? What are their preferred modes of learning? Do they like to learn by project-based learning? Do they like to learn by listening to a lecture? And lots of kids still do. Do they like to learn by doing X, Y, or Z, etc.? And then secondly, how do we modify their curriculum? And third, what kinds of enrichment has the most payoff for students down the road? What are the things that we've learned longitudinally matter the most when we look at success in school, success in life? Another huge goal for Joe and me and SEM is happiness. Do kids like learning? If children like learning, that's half the battle in getting them to succeed later on in life, if they enjoy learning. And so this is the background of some of the work that they're trying to do at this very impressive school. These are applied to three different areas: the regular curriculum, which is covered and will be covered, but more efficiently than it would be in many other places because of an analysis of what children already know that we'll talk about. Second, a series of opportunities called enrichment clusters. And third, after school types of things that we do outside of school. So Joe's going to talk a little bit about the three major goals of Schoolwide Enrichment Model. Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention also is that Sally and I talk about a lot of these ideas, but we need more practical things to implement them. So, for example, over the years, we've developed a series of instruments. One series, our most popular actually, is called Interstellar, where we ask children a series of questions to find out what their area of interest is, because we want to give them some opportunities to work in that particular area. We have even things like how much children like school, very important thing to measure, how students like to express themselves. And we have all of these in an instrument development package. Again, it's all free, there's no charge for it, and we're going to send it to your school and they can share some of that with you. On many occasions, we've been asked what are the objectives of our model. And when it comes to objectives, anytime I read about a new project, it seems like there are 14 pages of different goals and objectives. We keep ours very simple. Enjoyment. Enjoyment leads everything. When a child enjoys something, they're going to work harder. They're going to work with other people who enjoy that topic. You know this from your own lives. It's common sense. Enjoyment leads to engagement, and engagement is the hardest thing I've ever had to define. And I've looked up every definition anywhere. And I think the best way to describe engagement is by body chemistry. Think how you felt the first time you felt in love with someone or something. Your whole body chemistry change. You wanted to do more. You wanted to have more involvement with that particular person or thing. And so enjoyment leads to engagement, and those two things together lead to enthusiasm for learning. The child that enjoys himself or herself at school, or anywhere else for that matter, who is engaged is going to like the learning process. Learning is really fun if it's something that you're interested in. If it's just to memorize because on Friday we're going to give you a test, or in America we have a gun at our head with the state and national achievement tests that every principal, if you go into their school, the first thing, if they have good test scores, that's the first thing they'll tell you. They don't tell you how happy their children are. They don't tell you how engaged they are. They don't tell you whether or not they get along with their friends or not. It's just test scores, which is sort of dominated. And so we keep our goals very simple. In the world of assessment, there are two kinds of assessment, and one is what we call assessment of learning, and that's testing what you already know, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that. But we've also, as I said, developed many instruments that we call assessment for learning. What are the characteristics that a young person, or adult for that matter, has to have in order to want to learn more? And so again, we'll be sending articles, and we hope that they'll be distributed to you, where you'll see, again, lots of these instruments. Next slide, please. Pick up on this one.
So the Schoolwide Enrichment Model has been implemented many different ways. It's been implemented as a gifted and talented program. It's been implemented as an after-school program. It's been implemented, our favorite way to see it implemented is a school-wide theme. And so we've worked with hundreds of schools. Our colleague Nicole and I worked in Hartford, Connecticut. I always like to point this out. Many of the schools in Hartford focus on a regular curriculum, repetition, test preparation, making sure that kids know basic curriculum. And we don't do any of that at the Renzulli. We do the regular curriculum, but we don't focus on test prep. At the Schoolwide Enrichment Model is about creative productivity. It's about enjoyment of learning. It's a focused type of enrichment. And after 5 or 6 years of doing this, actually the second year we started a school based on, it's called the Renzulli Academy in Hartford, Connecticut. We are the first school in a very low income, very big city to reach the highest level of test scores in the state of Connecticut, the highest level, without ever focusing on test prep. So what I want to say, especially to those of you that are parents here, you might not see the kind of normal school situation you had when you were a child. That doesn't mean that your child is not going to excel academically. It just means it's done differently. So all of the kids learn academics. They do science fair. They do history projects. They do enrichment projects. They study things thoroughly. They're learning executive function. They're learning higher level thinking skills. They're learning all these things, and they excel at those things. They're just going about it in a different way. As my Italian husband likes to say, all roads lead to Rome. Rome, but there's many different ways to get there. You take a bus, you can take a train, you can take a plane. But what we're doing is giving kids a direction of getting there that's way more enjoyable and way more based on what they love and they want to do. There are many components of this that can be implemented over time, but already they're doing a tremendous amount with inquiry here. They're doing a tremendous amount with enrichment in all content areas. They're doing Renzulli learning. They're doing hands-on learning. They're doing music. They're doing art. These are all of the things that lead to successful enrichment outcomes. And the goal of a lot of this is the development of creative, productive giftedness, which is what this school is based on. And so Joe's this is the very famous model that Joe developed. This is one of the, if you take a course in educational psychology in the United States of America, you're going to read about Joe Renzulli. You're going to read about the 3-ring conception of giftedness, which is a developmental conception of talent. So What have we learned after 50 years? I was president of the National Association for Gifted Children. Joe and I have worked in this field. What have we learned? We've learned that you can develop talent. You can't develop it in every child. There has to be a certain amount of above average ability to be able to develop high levels of talent. But you can develop it in many children, and you can develop it by primarily looking at strengths and working on the development of above average ability, task commitment, and creativity. And task commitment in particular is extraordinarily important today. Many youngsters do not have task commitment. They spend too much time on technology. They spend too much time on their phone. They're not taught self-regulation. They're not taught to be able to do a hard project. They're not taught to read books that are challenging. All of those are built into a school-wide enrichment model. So in many ways, what looks like a very different enrichment pedagogy has better outcomes than other types of learning programs that don't involve these things. So this is the three-ring conception of giftedness called creative productive giftedness.
There's a lot I could tell you about this, but probably the important thing is that it got me kicked out of the field of gifted education. When I got into the business in the late 60s, early 70s, there was only one way to tell who was gifted and not gifted, and that was by IQ scores. 129, that's me. Sorry, you didn't make it into the gifted program. 130, that's Sally, you're gifted. Well,
true, actually.
I studied.
I
studied lots and lots of different literature, especially about famous people, many people who had made major contributions. You'll see a few of them in the next slide. And one of the things I found was that they certainly were above average ability in their area of specialization. In other areas, they were failure. So that's ICP in certain people, ACT at certain times, WCC within certain contexts. And so that's what that little diagram. And I submitted this to the 3 journals on gifted education at the time, and they were all unceremoniously rejected. And so I sent it to a general education journal, and they accepted it. And now I say, without much modesty, it is the most widely cited article in the field. No day goes by when I don't get an article with this thing cited in it. Mm-hmm. And basically what it says is it's the interaction between and among these 3 clusters of ability that produce what, again, Sally and I call gifted behaviors. That's not a noun, it's an adjective, gifted behaviors. And that's the ability to do some of the kinds of things that the people in the next slide will be doing.
So this is just to have context. Most enrichment gifted programs in the U.S. start by identifying the top 5%. This is just, we could give you 1,000 examples of this, but if we just identified the top 5%, these are some individuals that would be left out of programs, okay? So Maya Angelou didn't speak for 4 years. She had selective mutism because of a tragic event in her life. Thomas Edison didn't speak until he was 4 and didn't read until he was almost 8. He probably had dyslexia. Steven Spielberg was a C student who was kicked out of high school numerous times because guess what? All he ever wanted to do was make movies. His mother was told multiple times to send him to a psychologist, multiple times. She says, if I'd sent him to a psychologist, if I'd listened to his teachers and sent him for therapy, E.T. may never have been made. And I think she's probably right. This is Richard Branson, probably one of the most famous dyslexics in the world, who founded Virgin Airlines. And this is Temple Grandin, one of the probably most famous autistic individual in the world. If we had only looked at the top few percentages, so instead we look at young people who have emerging talents and we work on talent development over time. I mean, here's the thing. All of these people, it was accidental that they were able to do this. Not all of them had good school systems. We're trying to decrease the accidents and increase the circumstances that this can happen within a school setting. And so we'll show you some research later, but what we're trying to do is make sure that creative, productive behaviors don't happen by accident. Wherein what we know is that if we expose children to creative productivity, if we teach them how to do a project, if we teach them how to work hard, how to apply task commitment to an interest, they grow up wanting to do that. They seek opportunities. So again, that's our belief about increasing a reservoir of highly creative, productive individuals in the world. And also having kids use their talents to make the world a better, safer, kinder, more gentle, more interesting, more creative place, with better inventions, with things that are used for the betterment of our planet as opposed to the other direction. And so a lot of what we do is the kinds of projects that you're going to be seeing some of your students hear about. So we'll just give you a couple of examples of this. This is a little boy named Brooks McConnell. We're going to show you his face in a second. Here he is. He was in 5th grade. He worked on this project for over a year. He got the idea for a project by watching a television interview with his mother. His mother was watching a documentary on TV, and she called Brooks in, and she said, "Look at this. This is fascinating." She said, "This is a young man named Sam Burns, and he was 16 at the time. Unfortunately, he died at 17. He had progeria. That's rapid aging. So he had progeria, and for every year you live, I think you actually age 8 years. So he looked like he was 95 when he was actually 16. And this is the YouTube. They have the special that he was on was made into a documentary that you can get on YouTube. But it was his philosophy for a very happy life and why his life had been so happy. And they actually asked him one question about what do you regret you couldn't do? And he was very upbeat and fun. And he said, "Well, I always wanted to ride a roller coaster, and I couldn't." So this little boy, Brooks, spent 8 months of his 4th grade life trying to figure out how he could simulate a roller coaster ride to send it to Sam, because he knew that Sam's life was nearing its end. He developed how-to books. He got help from his teachers. He built a couple of sample roller coasters. He went to amusement park, sat in the first row, and filmed what it was like to be on a roller coaster. He got a store to donate, like a gadget store to donate one of these vests that vibrate. So we'll show you that. It's a vibrating vest. Here he is pretending to go down the roller coaster to get the best clips of the roller coaster ride. And by the time he finished 4th grade and was entering 5th grade, his project was done. He sent it to Sam. Sam had the simulated roller coaster ride before he died. And then Brooks said, "Well, there must be other people like Sam." This is Brooks at his school's Type 3 fair, which other kids come to see what older kids are doing and younger kids are doing. He explains the whole process of what he did, how many books he had to read. So you think about, how do you develop task commitment in a child? A child that does this develops task commitment over time. Once they've learned this, the less often they need to ask their teachers or parents for help, the more successful we know they've been. So, as time goes on, these are young people that are very self-motivated. We followed some of them to college. They become engineers, they become lawyers, they become doctors, they become scientists, they become artists, musicians, actors, any area. And again, we have a lot of longitudinal research on this. But we love this idea. And the other thing he did that we love even almost as much is he wrote, this is a type 3 study, creative productivity in the enrichment triad model. He wrote to roller coaster companies saying, "Hey, you guys, there's lots of people with disabilities that can't ride your roller coasters. Maybe you want to buy my invention and have it outside of the roller coaster at an amusement park so that all people can benefit from this." And we love that confidence as well that it creates in young people. And we have many, many examples of this. This is a simple one. This is a little girl from Mexico. We did training in Mexico. It's probably some of the most touching training that we've done.
Some of the poorest areas you'll ever see in your life.
We think we have poverty, and we do in the U.S., but nothing like the rural poverty we saw in Mexico. And this is a very bright little girl. The school has an SEM program, and here she is with she's holding 2 certificates, so you're going to get that this is a good outcome, right? She had no hot water or warm water in her very tiny little apartment. She lived with her sister and brother in a rural apartment in Chiapas area. And so she got the idea of developing a solar water heater, which is very easy to do with a bottle. And, you know, if you do it, a little bit of water, very easy to do. But she wanted to scale it up. So there would be enough hot water, warm water for warm baths in her apartment for her mother and father and siblings. So the teacher called the local university, and they found an engineer with experience in solar power, and he helped her develop this simple machine for under $10. You notice the discarded water bottles painted black. She got an old window frame so it magnifies the glass. She got a hose and was able to hook it into the water system. And for under $10, she was able to develop a solar water heater that works beautifully. She got all kinds of awards from the college, from her school district, and her teachers were asked, do you want to patent this? And she said, of course I don't want to patent it. I want to give it away to everybody in town so everybody can have hot water. And the idea, again, is creative productivity and also, again, the integration of skills. And this is the 21st century skills, and this is what the SEM does, this particular brand of learning. And when you think a little bit about this, you know, what she did that was so special was engaging, it was enthusiastic, and she loved what she ended up producing. And so this is what, you know, SEM is all about. This is what the model is all about. This is a lot about how it's applied to the regular curriculum, to something that this school does called enrichment clusters. They call them workshops right now, but they're moving in the direction of kind of more enrichment clusters. And this is what also the type of the goal is. The school also uses Renzulli Learning, which is the only thing that we end up charging for because it has to be modified and kept. It's an electronic portfolio system where kids sit down at a computer, they take the instruments that Joe and I have talked about, they answer a few questions, and then they're able to be given any number of thousands and thousands of enrichment activities and various types of enrichment that we have found online. And so this is also a big part of our system with exactly the same goals. So if you see them doing some enrichment on computer, it's something that we have developed as well. Do you want to add?
Yeah. No, go to the next one. Okay. Next thing that got me kicked out of the regular IQ cutoff score gifted business was a thing called the enrichment triad model. It was published about the same time as the 3-ring conception of giftedness. And basically, what we talk about in that particular model is that 2 types of general enrichment should be made available to all students. Type 1, we'll be explaining what these are as we move along. Type 2, think of that as thinking skills. And the ways in which children react to that determines whether or not they would revolve into a type 3. It's actually a very popular concept in psychology right now, what they call performance-based assessment. Give a kid an opportunity to go on a field trip or to participate in a particular project and see how they perform and how much farther they can go. So you can click that one more time. So you can enter type 3 from the regular school and curriculum, from the little boy that was watching on television with his mother, the young man that had progeria, completely a non-school experience. It could come from almost anywhere, but the idea is that it has certain characteristics, the 3 E's that we've already mentioned, and also just a young person's very, very strong interest in getting involved in something that is personally important to them or to a small group of kids who share the same interest.
Okay, so we're going to just briefly now talk just a little bit. We talked a little bit about assessment in the SEM. Paper and pencil, we try to create a talent portfolio for each child. So think of it this way. Instead of having a folder of stuff that's good and bad, things you get right, things you get wrong, you get a talent portfolio where the child is putting in their best work, the ways they like to learn, and these are things that are being assessed at the school, the kinds of things that make school more interesting and more joyful for them, the times they like to learn. A lot of times when you ask students in college, how do you learn best? They don't know. Nobody's ever asked them that. When do you write best? When do you work best? What's your favorite kind of product? What's your favorite way of learning? Do you like to do art? Do you like to do music? So these are things where constant metacognition about how they learn.
And again, one of the instruments, if I didn't mention it already, that we've developed is called the expression style inventory. How do you like to express yourself?
And so these are all also connected. And that's, of course, the first part of the SEM then. So the second part that we'll talk about briefly is the part that parents usually love the most. And this is in most schools, many above average students are bored a lot of the day. In the United States right now, and I can't speak for Switzerland, but I suspect it's similar, there's a tremendous amount of repetition of content. So believe it or not, we can eliminate for many academically talented students 3 to 4 days a week of content. And so by looking at what students already know and eliminating what they've already mastered, we can find more time. And that's curriculum modification. So today, we talked about this with the teachers. We were here working with the teachers today. Curriculum compacting is the most popular and best researched part of differentiation. So as a parent, I have Joe and I have 2 daughters together. Our older daughter was born early and had a learning disability, could have very little of her curriculum compacted. Our other daughter, Liza, started to read at 3. She is an incredibly bright kid, and we took 1 sabbatic leave from our jobs. I think that's a great example of compacting. We were going to take her out of school for almost 3 months, and we were going to just leave the United States, and we traveled in Europe, actually. We were in Switzerland part of the time. We came to Europe and Italy, and we went to China, and we went to Taiwan. We got to do lectures in various places, but she was going to miss, except the first week of school, she was going to miss all of September, October, November, and most part of December. And so I went to pick up work for them, because I was going to homeschool them during that time. And for our daughter, Sarah, I had this much work, like literally the entire 4 months of work. And for our daughter, Liza, the teacher said to me, well, just have her read. And I said, well, where's her work that she has to do? And they said, well, we did a bunch of assessment on her, and we're just going to have you read with her. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, basically, she's mastered everything she would need to do in 3rd grade. This is 3rd grade. And so I said, okay. And I went home and I said to Joe, what the heck would have happened if she'd been in school? And what would have happened if she'd been in school is she would have done all that work all over again, because mostly teachers don't do this. Compacting is identifying what a child already knows, documenting that they know it by some kind of pre-assessment, proving it. So you name the strength, name the content area, document that the child or students know it, small groups together, and then you change it. And when you change it, you don't just give more work. Now, if any of you were bright kids when you were in school, you probably remember you didn't always want your teacher to know you were smart, because what happened? You got more work. So you show you do well at math, great, do those 25 extra hard problems at the end of the chapter. Like, that's not what we do. We say, oh, great, you already know this work. What would you like to work on? Let's talk about some type 1s. Let's talk about some enrichment. Let's talk about a project you might like to do. When all of a sudden, you want to show that you can do your best work to earn the time to do something different, as opposed to just getting more work. And that's what it's such a simple concept.
Mention where this came from. I was a middle school math and science teacher, and I had some kids in my math class that were really, really super bright. You know how the problems get harder as you go down the page of a worksheet? Well, I would let them work backwards up it. Do the last row, bring it up to my desk. I check the answers, and then they were all done with their math for the day. And we also started doing that with homework as well. But the problem was, okay, what do I do with them? Because ordinarily, you just give them a hard worksheet. And so that's where the change it really brings in the concept that we mentioned in type 3 enrichment. I knew that if I were going to give them just harder worksheets, they'd fake it. Why show you can do it when all you're going to do more of the same? And so we developed this process, and the hardest part was finding resources in the third column for young people advanced in math who would want to work on something. I found some like junior engineering projects that involve math mainly, and gave them those things to work on. And I always let them make a selection because we wanted always to have some choice in there rather than here's what Mr. Teacher says you should do.
So the cool part of SEM is this. This is the enrichment triad model. And many of you probably already have picked this up. If you're parents here, if you're teachers, you may have heard of it. It's probably one of the most popular enrichment programs, enrichment models. It's really a curriculum enrichment approach. There's 3 types of enrichment in the enrichment triad model, and the arrows matter. So if I'm going to see a special on progeria, a young man with progeria, that's a type 1. Tonight could be a type 1 for some of you. Then if I want to do something, a type 3, a project, I'm going to have to learn how to do something in that area. So type 1 is exposure, type 2 is either group or individual training, and type 3 is the project that you end up doing. In this school and many other schools, type 1s and type 2s are given to all kids, but even little kids, even first graders and second graders can do a small amount of an individualized project. Type 1s are field trips, virtual field trips, movies, podcasts, DVDs, online activities, speakers. You taking your child, are you going to an event, going to a lecture, we went to the Lindt chocolate factory yesterday in the afternoon and looked at it was fascinating actually. We learned more about chocolate than I ever knew. But we went there and we had a wonderful type 1 in your beautiful country. So it was exposure to us. Do I want to go further with chocolate? Absolutely. I want to go further with chocolate. So type 1. So there might be speakers, there might be events. We, in the States, schools that use SEM oftentimes have a community registry. We bring parents in. So we had a parent that was a robotics engineer, and that's an overview, a type 1. We mentioned a little bit about type 2. Type 2 enrichment is teaching youngsters thinking skills, creativity training, problem solving, character development. The little boy that developed the roller coaster certainly developed character. He was caring about somebody else. He was learning how to help other people. He was thinking about how his invention might make a difference. Learning how to learn skills, interviewing, note-taking. We were talking today with the teachers here about how important it is to have multiple sources, that kids only now want to go to one source. They want to look on the internet. But having 4 or 5 sources can often teach you that there's inaccurate information, a lot of it on the internet, as you know. And there's lots of research showing how many children now just want to do one thing. I think the other area that's really, really important is metacognitive technology skills.
I think now with the internet, these are most important. I really need to redo this slide and add artificial intelligence. I think that this is going to be something that we probably at a very early age start to teach children what it's all about, how to use it, hopefully for good things. There's a lot of things that are not so good you can do with artificial intelligence, but that's here to stay. I don't think a day goes by that I don't get a dozen articles or mention of artificial intelligence in my inbox. And so I think that that's really the use of technology is probably an absolute necessary skill for young people.
We're barely staying ahead of it in the U.S. As soon as we develop a system to show that the student themselves hasn't written a paper, somebody else has, artificial intelligence makes it easier for them to do it. So, I mean, we're actually kind of behind on this. So a lot of what we talk about with type 2 enrichment, you will see if you are a parent of students in this school: research skills, critical thinking, teaching kids how-to books, how to do a project, etc. We've already mentioned type 3 enrichment, and so these are students building on student interests. These are enabling students to move forward and to integrate planning and research skills and executive functions into starting and finishing something.
Let me give you an example of that. In the U.S., at least 3 times in elementary school, children memorize the names of the states and capital of the 50 U.S. states. And they know it's going to show up on some test. And so I worked with a group of teachers and said, is there any way you could make this topic more interesting? And they came up with, in 10 minutes, they came up with 22 ideas. I can only remember a couple of them. One was a matching game where on the left-hand side of the page, they had the name of the state capital of the state. And then on the right-hand side of the page, what was that state best known for? And and then you would draw lines from the state capital to what it was best known for. At the time, although it's changed in the last couple of months, Connecticut was best known for the invention of the Frisbee. You know what a Frisbee is? All those guys that worked at an ice cream factory where they have these big 5-gallon things and they took the top on lunch hour and sailed it around. But recently, I think Connecticut's been recognized as the pizza capital of the USA because there are many, many famous pizza stores. Another group of teachers, another idea was to write a travel ad for the capital. Why would somebody want to visit, for example, Boise, the capital of Idaho? And there were a number of others as well. I can't remember them, but in 10 minutes, they came up with 22 different ideas to make states, why a city was the capital of the state more interesting, more important.
And that's kind of what we call enrichment pedagogy. It's a different kind of teaching. It's a different kind of learning as well. So one other component of Schoolwide Enrichment Model that you'll probably hear a little bit more about if you're a parent of the school, if you're a teacher, this is the way a lot of people start doing this, are enrichment clusters. These are non-graded groups of kids that come together, work with an adult in an area of interest. They choose what they're going to study, always creating a project or product or a service. So we have kids that do television production. We have children that work on gardening. We have kids that work on environmental protection. We have kids that work together on a creative writing magazine. Again, the goal is creative productivity, and this is built into the school day. Oftentimes, there's a lot of social emotional learning and affective development that go into these. For example, when you're teaching kids about saving a planet, when you're teaching youngsters about doing good things for other people, these things make a difference. Today, we talked with the teachers here about the ideas of turning their workshops that they currently have a little bit more into this type of learning, which will, again, have a product or a service. And much of this is the goal of, again, talent development. So students read a series of descriptions of enrichment opportunities, and they choose the ones they'd like to participate in.
An example, in the school that was our children went to, they had enrichment clusters on a rotating basis. So this week it would be Monday morning, next week Monday afternoon, then it would go to Tuesday morning. And whenever our kids got off the school bus, we met them. We never asked them if they learned anything new in school. We said, did you have any fun in school today? Mm-hmm. And we can always tell with what our daughters called cluster day. They would just bubble over with what came out of the enrichment cluster. Because as Sally had mentioned earlier, it's a different brand of learning from just stuffing information in kids' heads, usually to take a test.
And we were very lucky that the school systems that where Nicole taught, where we worked around us, were our kind of field tests for a lot of this information, and still use the model. So let me just, these are the major features of enrichment clusters that teachers are all participating. There are no predetermined lessons or unit plans because it's based on students' interests. Kids do different things within a cluster. And again, these are very exciting, authentic methods. Kids are doing different things. They're doing it in specially set aside time blocks. and we're suspending the regular rules of schooling. So there's not a curriculum, rather there's enrichment opportunities. It's not a lot of prep for teachers because they're doing things in areas that they like. I worked as a parent. I was the facilitator of a number of enrichment clusters. So some of you that are parents or you're teachers, you might actually get to do some of this on your own as well. I'm just going to move forward. These are some of the ways that we do this with Renzulli Learning. We would be remiss if we did not tell you, as we mentioned earlier, that SEM research has been going on for a long time. We're not going to go through each of these. We promise to wrap up in 5 minutes or so you have some time for questions, but we've looked at all of these different areas: how we develop giftedness, how we identify kids, what kinds of opportunities lead to more identification, how the enrichment triad model works, how we use enrichment clusters, what are the effects on all students, curriculum compacting, the most researched type of differentiation in the world. More studies done on compacting. I mean, in the articles that we wrote about this, I only included published research, but there were probably 25 doctoral dissertations on curriculum compacting too. How we can implement SEM in reading, how we can implement SEM with diverse populations, and probably some of the stuff you'll be most interested in, and that is SEM with longitudinal outcomes. So for example, we know that students that participate in doing projects in elementary and middle school are more likely in high school and college to say they want to do a project on their own. They initiate more projects. We know that they have positive perceptions on learning. We know that gifted underachievers, bright kids that are underachieving in school, when you give them a project based on their interest and let them work with a teacher that they like, more than 80%, 85% reduce their underachievement, which is an amazing thing because it's really hard to reverse underachievement. Underachievement almost always starts in upper elementary school. The longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to reverse. By the time kids get to high school, if they're still underachieving, half of them don't end up going to competitive colleges. We know a lot about underachievement. We also know how to reverse it. How to reverse it is not by giving them stricter teachers. It's not by punishing them. It's not by taking away what they love. It's by letting them do something in an area of interest with a teacher that they will enjoy working with and having that bond. We've learned a lot about enrichment clusters. And again, I just want to make sure that we say this over and over again. Hundreds of studies done on the use of enrichment pedagogy and the positive outcomes. And when we compare an enrichment school with a school that doesn't use enrichment, the effects of the enrichment school are almost always better. More kids graduating from high school, higher grades, more kids going to college. If you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because they like learning.
Actually, there are 3 Dutch economists that have sent us a couple of articles they've written on schools we started in Holland a number of years ago. And the results were just amazing. Don't forget, these are not educators, they're economists. And these kids got better jobs, they went to more competitive colleges, they had more successful careers. And I think that, as you know, the leading item on any political agenda, especially in the U.S. right now, is the economy. And these economists just showed that, in fact, these kinds of things contribute to the growth of the economy.
Yeah, and those are the 3 economists from Holland. We didn't even know they didn't even contact us. They just were able to get the economic data, after they published them, but beforehand. So, okay, so we're going to wrap up in a few minutes so you have time for questions. I think it's also important to know that a lot of the longitudinal research that we mentioned, and again, if you're interested, these are just some of the studies that have been done. I plucked out some over a 40-year period. We plucked out some. But one of the things we've learned is that a lot of students find the area that they love by doing a project as a child. So it makes sense. If you're working in an area you like, you want to go and major in that in college, you want to find work in the area. So I like to think of it as a type 4 in the enrichment triad model. When something you do as a child that you love ends up being what you want to do for the rest of your life.
We also encourage children when they're writing their personal letter of application for college not to talk about the trip that they took to New Zealand, but rather talk about a type 3 project that they did.
Many U.S. universities are now requiring portfolios of students' projects, and that makes again a very nice thing to be able to have, to say something that you've done, an invention, an article that you published, poetry that you published, etc. So, I guess in short, we can say that we've learned that SEM works, and also that there are great benefits for teachers as well. So teachers usually enjoy working in an SEM school because they're doing things that they like. They get to do enrichment clusters in an area that they choose. They get to work with kids on stuff that they know that children like. They can reverse underachievement. It's a positive, challenging, but positive way to teach. And we find a number of benefits for teachers too, even the idea of curriculum compacting. So in conclusion, we want to give time for questions. These are our goals. We're very excited about the application of SEM in the School for Tomorrow. We're very excited about the nuances of social emotional learning and teaching kids to use their talents to make the world a better place. In the United States, there's too much focus on test scores, and we think not enough focus on engagement of learning. So a lot of times when schools decide to do SEM, it's because they want this focus to be changed. In short, these are, we'll send this PowerPoint, but these are videos all over the country. We don't actually even sometimes know schools use SEM, and then they send us a great video about how they're using it. So if you want to see a number of schools in action, and I know the plan is to do a video of this school and some of the ways that things are doing. In short, Joe and I believe that schools should be places for talent development. They shouldn't just be places that kids go to learn what we know they don't know, but they should be places for talent development. And we should give time to develop talents. And then we also know how to create giftedness. We create it by giving kids opportunities, resources, and encouragement, but always in their areas of interest.
I was going to say, bring up the last slide.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite slides. This little boy that we worked with in Massachusetts who developed a button-making business. You had buttons made for your child's birthday and things like that. A button-making business. And so I was visiting one day.
He was in an enrichment cluster on social entrepreneurship. Yeah.
My hair was a little darker then. Anyway, he came up and he said, I'm glad you helped us start this. I'd like to give you a button. So I took 2 buttons and I started to put them both in my pocket. And he said, Mr. Renzulli, I'm giving you 1 button. The other one will cost you 50 cents. and that's what turned out in the back of my mind to be the definition of type 3 enrichment. The child thinking, feeling, very important, and doing like the practicing professional, but even if at a more junior level than a scientist from Harvard. But what I like most about this picture is the look on Michael's face. How many days a week would you like your child to come home from school with that look on their face? I call it the face test. It's more important than the IQ test or anything else. It's the face test. And look at the joy there that little 7-8-year-old is experiencing, and I love that picture.
Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, this is our website at the University of Connecticut. We've told you we give almost everything away on our website. Articles, PowerPoints. We do a free SEM online course every 8 weeks. We have teacher training videos. And we're very excited about the interest in our work here, and very happy that we've had this opportunity to give you an overview. You may have some questions for the people that run the school, but if you want to ask any questions of Joe and me, I hope that we can reassure you that this is based on 40 years of research. There are thousands and thousands of schools that use this. We haven't been to all of them, obviously, but we've been to a lot. And, what we saw in this school yesterday and today brought us a great deal of joy. And so we'd like to just say thank you and open the discussion up for questions that any of you might have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes?
You briefly mentioned it, AI.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, how do you think AI will impact SEM?
You know, the way that I would hope AI would impact SEM is that it amazes me that when so much else has changed in our world, we still don't have a simple way of understanding what kids already know in school. So there ought to be, you know, some very smart developers going to sit down, enter all the standards, every content area in Switzerland, and then find out immediately if a student can pass a pre-assessment of that. And when that happens, you know, education will be revolutionized.
The Renzulli learning system, I think, before the word AI ever came into vocabulary, was probably an example where we're letting the machine do the hard work. By sitting down and answering a series of questions, we know what a child's interests are, we know their preferred learning style, we know their preferred ways of wanting to express themselves. And then the computer reads that information, which is what AI would do, and it gives a profile for the student. And so I think that that's really an example of AI in action before AI ever came along. And teachers can't possibly take care of the mound of paperwork of reading and understanding every child's interest desires, their learning style preferences, their expression style preferences, their enjoyment of school, their enjoyment of learning. We've got instruments for all of that, and the machine's doing the hard work.
That's the profiler. The curriculum compacting part of that would be if we could apply that to the regular curriculum, that we could do pre-assessments online and know that a child's mastered certain spelling or mathematics. And because so much time is spent in grouped instruction in school that many kids don't need. When we look at curriculum compacting, we can eliminate, as I mentioned, 50, 60, 80% in some students. Our daughter Liza's example in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, she was so bored in school because they kept doing things she already knew. So I think that would be a great asset for artificial intelligence. I also have a great deal of worries about artificial intelligence and what will happen. You know, we already see some effects of it at the college level. Again, kids cheat so creatively now, and they get away with it because we can't keep up with. You know, as soon as we develop something to identify that this is not your writing, then you know the next level of AI comes out. So. You know, it's an interesting time to be a teacher, and a very interesting time to think about knowledge production. I do think what's unique about SEM is the creative opportunities, the creative choice, and that's of course something that not yet, maybe sometime in the future, but we still haven't gotten AI that can come up with patents, that can come up with inventions, that can come up with new ideas. Certainly not ways to make the world a better place. So well, it's a great question, though.
Other questions related to that?
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up to this. I agree. I've been a high school teacher for 15 years, and I agree that AI has a lot of potential to support teachers and to support the system. But I'm very concerned with what it is doing to young people. I don't know if you're familiar with the recent MIT study that looked at what brain scans of students writing essays with the help of AI. And it showed that basically there's no way to it. And I've seen that firsthand in my high school classrooms. I'm an English teacher, so almost everything I do involves students thinking and reading and writing. And over the last couple of years, the ability of students to actually think is going down in a way that is very concerning.
Yeah. Agree.
So I was actually thinking about this when we were talking about masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
It's really related. Like, what do we do to create that masculinity and to create the engagement in young people when there's so much distraction and there's so much push towards what they see as shortcuts, which are really just breaking down their abilities to think.
Right.
Well, I think that one of the things that we can think about doing is having them produce something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it might be one of those masks there, or it might be two masks with a theme. Putin talking to what's that guy's name?
Trump.
You know, and what would they talk about when they put the mask on? I mean, to create and produce something in an area that you have some interest in an area that you would like to be something that would be a comedy, that something would be a serious incident in somebody's life. I think that producing something with whatever resources you have access to is probably the best advice I could give any teacher to keep kids engaged and turned on and possibly doing more advanced follow-ups.
Yeah, I developed a program at UConn called Idea Grants, and because I had the same concern. We can control it a little bit more in public school, in elementary, secondary school, but when you get to college, so much of cutting is going on in classes. I was a former high school English teacher as well. And so we had students write an application for a grant, a leadership project grant, service grant, something they wanted to do to make a difference. And so, I mean, you can look them up, University of Connecticut, IDEA grants, IDEA grants. If you could do something like this in your classroom and give kids a day a week to work on them, but they have to have a creative outlet. It has to be something that hasn't been done before. It has to, I mean, I think that's the only way, because other than that, there's, you can have them write an essay, you can have them write a critical analysis, anything they can do. They can draw on artificial intelligence, change a couple of words in every sentence, and they won't even have written it. It might take them, a half hour to do a 15-page paper as opposed to what it used to do. The only way to come away from that is to do something that's unique and creative and to give them that opportunity, which is why I kind of think that type 3 enrichment is more important now than it ever has been, because it's going to be a unique solution. It's going to be something that's just, like the little boy that did the roller coaster or the little girl that did the wall. We saw them building that over time. We saw them working on it. And I think that that's, I'm really interested also in executive function and the MIT study that you mentioned. Lack of executive function is going to be one of the biggest problems we see in people being successful in college and in work. The ability to plan something, to start, to know the steps, to finish. I mean, we're seeing a lot of young people in the States that don't have that. And if you've been involved in a program like this, you learn those skills. So I think it's to not give the traditional kind of assignment that we would normally give as English teachers. I mentioned that's my background and Nicole's background as well. Nicole was a high school English teacher, the three of us, high school English teachers. I think to do something that has a creative output and is different than the normal assignment, even to be more creative and creative writing opportunities, to actually show that, again, brainstorm different characters, brainstorm different plots, brainstorm different protagonists, antagonists, settings, and then make them randomly select and write. That can't be done with artificial intelligence. So
I think that getting into kids' minds, a product outlet audience, we started a thing at the University of Connecticut a number of years ago called Invention Convention. It's an annual competition, and by grade level, they work on an invention, and they all come to our big domed area and to share their inventions. And I think that something like that we have in the U.S. Every state has a science fair. Many of them now have math competitions. There's a new thing, 10 years old, History Day competition. And I think that those kinds of things are important for youngsters to be motivated to get involved in something even, and Sally mentioned our younger daughter who has just made a film, and she's entering it into various filmmakers competitions, and she'll probably, if she wins one, she'll have a greater opportunity to get a producer's job on television or
for distribution of her movie, yeah.
And so I think that if we think about, again, product, outlet, audience is something that, why Sally and I are here if you weren't there. It's basically, we've got an audience for a group of people who took the time from their busy lives to come and hear something about their children's school. And I think if we can get that across through opportunities like Invention Convention, National History Day, those are the kinds of things that kids work for. We really should follow what they do in sports, don't we? In sports, they have that all arranged, It depends on what league you're in. It depends on what your competition is. And I think that also we see that oftentimes in school clubs. Who comes? People that are interested in the topic. What are they there for? To get into some competition related to that particular topic.
Okay. Yes, Dick.
I have a little follow-up question to this. If you had like a magical button and you could change one thing in all of the schools worldwide, I don't know if you ever thought of anything similar. What's the one thing that you think, if you were to change that in all of the schools, would have the biggest impact?
I can think of two or three things, yeah.
One that sort of pops to my mind is that we could put all lesson plans into a shredder. I think that so much of it is what somebody beforehand has decided upon. And I don't know about Switzerland, but in the U.S., there's always the things that come along. The most recent one is the standards. What's the
MTSS, modes of, it's which students need special education is a new thing.
Yeah, and standards, what's the other Standards Act
I don't know.
in the U.S.?
Well, you would do away with standardization of curriculum, I think, probably, yeah. Two things came to mind. One is age-related grouping, and the other thing is standard grades, because I think we get kids that work for a grade and not because they want to learn. I would prefer to see, less grading and more of teachers actually talking about more authentic assessment of what students do. Kids, if you think about that little girl that did the solar heater, she didn't do that for a grade, and to give her a B plus or an A minus or even an A plus, kind of insulting. That's not what she did the work. So those two things came to mind. It's a creative question. Maybe the first time I've ever been asked that in my 50-year career. So that's yes.
Yes. Since you mentioned the sports have it all organized, I just wanted to ask my question. The first one thing for me, that if we manage to get this artificial intelligence to be actually artistic intelligence, that's something that should.
Yes. Yes.
Yay. But I wanted to put on this thing that usually the sports is very competitive, right? And actually to be one of these projects or products, it's this boy was one that did it in a way on his own path, but many of them are in groups, about collaboration, about building healthy relationships. It wasn't mentioned today, but how do you see that in schools for the future?
That's a great, we saw it, certainly. Nicole, do you want to say something?
Sure.
Because we watched that here at the school.
Yeah, I think that in terms of healthy relationships. Sure. Yeah. In terms of healthy relationships, it's perhaps one of the most important things that you can do in a school is start with healthy relationships to make sure that not only are your students comfortable with themselves, but that they're finding relationships with each other. Because if you don't have a sense of self, it's very hard to then feel comfortable to take a risk in learning. You have to know who you are and stand in yourself so that you can then say, oh, it's okay to then step out and figure out how to say, yeah, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go for it. And I know, for example, here at SOT, that's a very, very big part of what the teachers do. And when you talk about differentiation, you have to differentiate that for the students on a constant basis. And it's the very underpinning of what we do here. And when it comes to Schoolwide Enrichment Model, it is the very first thing you have to do. And it's not just the students, it's the teachers too. Because let me rephrase. A lot of people think anybody can be a teacher. Let me tell you, that is a misconception. Teaching is not just, do I know the subject? And if you think that, you're going to have a very hard time teaching. Teaching is, can I be vulnerable enough to understand the students and to see them every single time they come in the classroom and really be willing to figure out what is right with them, who they are, and give them a chance to show themselves, because every time they come in, they're different people. You know, a lot of times we talk about learning and we think that everybody's going to go like this and then they're going to go up. Well, during the day, how many of you go like this or go like that? Throughout the day, we see kids go like this. And so that's a big part of how we differentiate for kids throughout the day. And then when you're doing that, that's how this happens.
Yeah.
Michael.
Michael was one of a group of 7 students. So, you know, he became the leader, but he found out how difficult it was to run a group of 7 first, second, and third graders when he was the leader. And he had to and they all had to deal with understanding each other, being patient, being kind, but also having a business. I mean, they ran a business. They got this going.
You had to have groups like there was a design department, there was a marketing department, there was
a financial department.
And also one of the persons on that was a loan specialist because they needed money to borrow money to get the stamp making machine.
Button making, yeah.
Had to get $75 from the principal. But I do think that, you know, if I had a magic wand, I probably would insist that every Friday afternoon, before children went home for the weekend, they were given a school happiness test and asked what made them happy this week at school, what made them unhappy, and there's a few other questions. Artificial intelligence would analyze it and send it to the teacher. And I think that again, you want to get that look on kids' face, you better work on school happiness.
I just wanted to add something quickly to your question, because I think that's also one of the things that inspired me to change the school system, because I realized very often in school, I had a bit of a problem when I went from Zurich to Lugano. So I was a Guinea student here, and then I went to Lugano, and I was a very good student there. And I realized the better I got, the fewer friends I had. And it went very quickly. So I had a very important decision to make at age 14, 15. Do I want friends or do I want to be good at school? And I found sort of the balance and decided I'll be just good enough to continue so that I still have some friends. And it's something that really bothered me, because I realized there was really no choice. It wasn't possible to have both. And so I also decided when we found the school, when we created a school, I want a school where competition is transformed into co-creation. Where it's not about, well, if I am better than you are worse than me. It's about, if I'm better at this, you're probably better at that. So let's see how we can work together. And I think the elements that we are using at School of Tomorrow from the Schoolwide Enrichment Model, they enhance that even more, because what we see very often, and in a traditional school, a child that's very good at math, it would either be, oh, he's good, or in Germany we would call him how? Streber, exactly. Right? He's a Streber, and he's never has friends. Whereas we see it on a daily basis when a child is struggling in math, there's someone that comes to him and says, oh, you should go ask him. He's really good. He can help you for sure. And the same thing happens across the other subjects. I think that's one of the key things that I think if we can transform schools to become a place of co-creation and teamwork, this is really going to change society as a whole.
Remind me also, one of the instruments that we've developed is a school belongingness scale. You know, you feel like you're appreciated there. And that's not the case with a lot of kids.
Yeah.
So maybe let's take 3 more questions or something.
Okay, yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Good.
Go ahead. And then you first, and then there's the woman in the back too.
I'm very curious if there is any application of the SEM model more into the adult world.
That's a great question. Yeah. Is SEM into the adult world? Well, yes, at the college level, I mentioned the IDEA grant program that we've done. We have a number of friends that have told us that they've used SEM if their parents are in a convalescent home or, senior citizens. We have senior citizens gatherings that have called us and said, we think your model would work here. Some type 1s, some type 2s, some type 3s in a senior citizens situation. But I think probably the most extensive use would be the pedagogy in a college, or a university, where you see senior projects in engineering. We see lots of high schools use an exit senior project, and we're seeing more people contact us about the ways we evaluate type 3 projects, which are again not with grades, but rather with assessment forms and narratives. But I think of learning this way. I mentioned our granddaughter, who's a 7-year-old. I think of a type 1. I think of type 2s. I think of possible type 3s. I actually grandparent that way, based on my many years of working with this. So, did you want to add anything about adult SEM use?
No, not really. Although I do think that if teachers could follow a little plain old advice, don't tell them, show them, and get the kids to do that as well. I think that it's easy to tell somebody. Most college professors stand behind the lecture and hold forth on their wisdom. Well, I don't think that's the best way to inspire what active learning is all about.
Yeah, I guess I would also say that to some extent, having adults come in and work with kids on type 3s, have adults be mentors, that's kind of bringing SEM in, that's an adult application of SEM, because we as adults love to proselytize about the things we love. I study highly talented, eminent women, high creators, and I've just published a couple of chapters on women at the highest levels of creativity, a couple of women that are on the short list for a Nobel Prize, and they love what they do. And when you say, what do you like to do most? They say, I like to lecture to people that are introductory in my field so I can turn them on to what I do. So I think there's adult application that way too. It's a great question.
No, I was more thinking, I think there is so much need for it.
Yeah.
Because I think you had a society, we all came through the very traditional school system.
Right.
The world is changing more rapidly than ever. There is a strong need to continue learning. And I think many haven't learned to learn. I mean, even if you look at organizations, how we develop, I just think there is so much.
We get so many letters and emails from people that went into the wrong job. They majored in something that they loved and then didn't find work that they loved, and they say, what can I do now? I mean, I think you're right. I think it's a really interesting topic. Plus, of course, 50% of the work that people do now were not jobs 10 years ago. So it's just evolving more quickly, and we've got to teach the skills and steps as opposed to the job, and also what one loves. So great question.
There's some recent work out on career categories, and there's like a dozen of them, and what you do in each of the categories. I think that when people are looking forward to their work life, they should have a better picture of what
category
they do on a day-to-day basis. When I graduated from college, I was looking for a graduate school, and I was thinking about a law school, and I went and spent a couple of days with a very good friend of mine who was a lawyer, and I said, oh my God, contracts. All he did all day was read contracts, change this, put a punctuation mark here and there, and I said, oh my God, my idea was, watching Perry Mason on television, the lawyer in the courtroom. It was just completely opposite.
Which is why 58% of lawyers in the United States now never practice law. 58% of people graduating from law school in the U.S. right now. I know that because of my job at UConn. When I was a higher level administrator, 58% of people from UConn Law School, pass the bar, but then never practice. They go into other areas, which of course the law is a good conduit, but oftentimes they're not finding work they love, unfortunately. You had a question, the woman standing. Yeah.
I have two things to say. The first is I am in a job already. I see many children, now they are 14, coming to high school or higher to study, and they have psychological problems. Because the pressure, the school, and this is a real problem in Switzerland. So I think with your system, you can take the pressure out, and they also learn how to manage themselves. So they will later, maybe, I hope, not so many in the psychological
depression, anxiety,
This is the first. And the second is, I think for ground and the outside stuff, at the base, and now out from school, so they study or learning something. The people are not yet ready for this system, and so they learn in the school now how to do it. It's really good. But after, the other step also have to apply your system or to learn, so the children can go on.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
That's also the problem. I hope for the future they also will adapt to this, and then they can also go ahead. And sometimes also for me difficult if this is the money in Switzerland, but the poor family have not the connection or the resources. If you have some child or children you want to bring up, maybe in the school they are good, but the resources around them is not enough. Right. And that's also the problem.
Yeah. I do want to just mention that our colleague Salome Mueller has been studying SEM in Switzerland for how many years now? 21, and has worked in SEM schools in Basel area, and so it might be of interest if when we break for you to have a chat with her. You want to just stand up and show them who you are. And what university? Mention your university. And so she's at a university, and she and her late husband, who was a dear friend of ours, were also pioneers in this area. So you might want to have a chat with her before you can ask a little bit about Swiss schools. I think that a lot of ways you just start slowly. You start with a few students and a few projects, or you start with some enrichment clusters, or you start with some creative activities for students. But you make a very good point. Schools have to be ready for this. But I will say this: if we waited for schools to be ready to do this in the U.S., we would never have started, because sometimes you've just got to try it and do a trial. And so we usually love to work with educators that we call positive malcontents. They see a better way of doing something and they want to try it. So, I think it would be great to see a little bit more of that as well.
Oh, the concept that I couldn't remember before was what's very popular in the U.S. now is called Common Core State Standards.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And I believe that that's made from people that lead different organizations, usually in the states, state departments of education. And I think that we need more input from teachers, a ground-up approach to making change, rather than somebody that hasn't been in a classroom for 30 years is telling us that these are the standards we should be following.
Yeah, a couple more. I mean, Diego, up to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
First, thank you for traveling all the way to us. We have a question about, we are parents of kindergarten son, and how do you apply your system on a very young age? kindergarten, because I see a lot of primary projects
Yeah.
kindergarten.
Is he in the school?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also how can we use the system at home,
Right.
the model and apply it at home, because we are very happy here in the school, but I don't feel that at home we are doing enough, or we are just classic home. But I would like to do more of this at home.
So I mean, I think we talked about this with the kindergarten, first and second grade teachers today, and we talked about what we would call a type 2.5. So a project that's actually developed by a teacher. So everybody makes a pop-up book, but you make your pop-up book about a subject that you love. So you identify a subject, your content goes into it. We talked about kids doing little podcasts for each other. We talked about them writing their first short story or a school newspaper. So there are many, many ways this can be implemented for primary grade teachers, and we went over that with the teachers today. I think the home thing, the type 1 enrichment, making sure you continue to expose in a number of areas, making sure you try to do some creativity training, ask questions, play games. We think that probably the most important thing a parent can do is exhibit love of learning. So most people, if you think about what you love to learn, we did museum trips this summer with our granddaughter, and I said to my daughter, you don't have to worry about enrichment. I'm going to be an enrichment specialist of one. So, we took her recently to a museum where they had constructed fairy villages for Halloween time, which is a very big deal, and they had all these different fairy villages, and each one was based on a theme, and for 2 hours, I didn't say a word, and we didn't say a word. She just ran around to everything and asked questions, and that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to do. And you live in such a rich place in terms of resources and encouragement and enrichment opportunities. So I think a healthy dose of enrichment at home, whether it's reading a book, of a different topic and trying nonfiction, and there's nothing wrong with watching television when you do it mindfully, finding a show that you watch together and asking questions about it. What did you like? What didn't you like? What would you like to do? Is there more you'd like to learn about this? At the same time, also realizing that kids are little and they want to play. So imaginative play is one of the best things. You give kids time to create a game. Create a game for me. Tell me how you can learn this by making it fun. Making learning fun is what parents should do. Your focus should be on having it be enjoyable and fun. And then the school can fill in the rest. Yes.
How you support neurodiversity?
Neurodiversity, yes. So I would love to have you take my email and email me. I'll send you to any number of sites. I just completed a 5-year study on autism, academically talented students with autism. I've studied students with learning disabilities of multiple types. And we call it in the U.S. either neurodiversity. In our field, I prefer twice exceptional. And the reason I prefer twice exceptional is it acknowledges the talent. So you have an academically talented student with a disability as well. We have a daughter like that. She has a high aptitude, but she has very, very serious dyslexia. She was a premature infant. She lost oxygen at birth. So I've written a book on this. I'd be glad to send you I think I sent a PDF of the book to my friend Salome and to Nicole. Be glad to send you a PDF of it. Publishers shouldn't probably know that, but I'm glad to do it anyway. And be also very happy to refer you to some people. One of the best ways we can support neurodiversity with the SEM is to have a talent development goal every year every semester for every child who's neurodiverse. When our child had very severe learning, she read at the 2nd grade level in 9th grade. They told us she would never go to college. Everybody told us, we would be very fortunate if she could finish high school with her reading disability, until she broke code and was able to learn by word memory, primarily sight memory. But the point that I would make to you is it's such a better world now for neurodiverse kids because of the tools that have come with AI. That's the one benefit, well, one of the many benefits of AI. But if there is any approach that will work with neurodiverse students, just forgive me for being a little passionate about it, it's a strength-based approach. So what are your interests? It's a strength-based approach, which is what we advocate. What are your strengths? What are your interests? What can you do? How can you compensate for the disability by working on something that's an interest area? What different product can we use for you? What different ways can we look at your talents, understanding that they're going to be filtered by a disability, but that you can still succeed at high levels? Which is why I like to show you the slide of those individuals with disabilities that became very famous. That happened potentially more by accident than by plan, but what we need to do is plan more about it and look at strengths and look at interests. So I email sally.reis, R-E-I-S, @uconn.edu. You can get it from anybody here, or if you come up to me, I'll give it to you later. Let me send you 3 or 4 articles. And again, reach out to the people here. They have a number of very bright kids with disabilities at this school, and they are doing a very, very good job, I think, at accentuating strengths and looking at ways to modify interests and be able to have students understand you can compensate for a disability while you also develop a strength and a talent.
I'm very interested because I'm in practice as a mother, and I'm studying a lot about helping her. And there are also tools. Yesterday evening I had a webinar, some tool who is doing, my daughter also has autism, dyslexia, and ADHD due to anxiety and depression a little bit, but a lot of bullying from school. And she is very sweet girl. I found an autism classroom, but it's very hard to adapt. Teacher is very important. I am very passionate in learning, supporting her. So I'm her therapist, mother, teacher, very creative, and I try to support her, and information is important. And
well, I certainly understand. I've spent the last 5 years doing this, and I can tell you there can be a very bright future with the right circumstances, and that's what you have to try to find. So be glad to chat with you afterwards for a few minutes, too. Thank you.
Last question. Not that I have just a curiosity. If we think of revolutionizing the school system in the world, how do you guys see it? Do you think we can create a sort of school system that suits all the kids, or do we need to look at a variety of systems so that every type of child will find what they need?
That's a great question.
How would you do that on a large scale?
I think it would be a variety of systems, and also, fortunately or unfortunately, the case may be, parent expectations. If we're, for example, not just getting our kids into colleges, but to the best colleges, we're going to be different from a parent who just hopes their child will finish high school and get a good job. So I believe we need a variety of systems rather than just a one-size-fits-all.
Having said that, I think if every school looked at strengths more and a little less on deficits, education would be better for everybody. I think we've been a deficit-driven profession as opposed to a strength-based profession. And, you know, our system is the development of creative productivity. But I do believe that, that strength-based, interest-based education could help most students.
As one boy said to me who was constantly getting in trouble, they find out what I can't do, won't do, don't like to do, and they spend the rest of the year beating me to death with it.
Yeah.
You know, well, can't we just change that around and find out what they like to do, what they want to do? You know, one of the things I think we could take a good lesson from is extracurricular activities. I think I stole the idea for enrichment clusters from extracurricular activities. Who goes? People that want to. Who teaches it? Somebody that has a special interest in teaching it. Who's there? Other kids are interested in that area. And in almost every case, in addition to just receiving information, there's a product or they're going to play a game. Our grandson just started the University of Connecticut. He's a cross-country runner, but not good enough for the team right now as a freshman. So he joined the club. There's a club of
non-varsity
non-varsity cross country. He joined the university newspaper, so he's already had 3 remarkable articles that were published, and so
you say with no pride at all.
Yeah. And one of them was a very controversial article because it had to do with the husky dog or the University of Connecticut Huskies. And there's a very mean-looking husky that's taken over, and he wanted to go back to the old happy-looking husky, and he got a lot of good feedback on it. Extracurricular activities are really something that is. You go because you want to. You go to the school newspaper because you want to be on the school newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
One last.
Yes, go for it.
So I wrote down some notes, but in regards to tests and assessments, I'm going to ask you a question, but then I just want to go through a few notes. In your professional opinion, when should tests and assessment be implemented? And my thought approach to this is we mentioned sports and competitiveness. And obviously, I completely understand that tests have a bad rep. I've experienced some bad tests myself back in the day, but also some really good ones that then gave me drive. But sports and competitiveness can also create a lot of drive and engagement. And excelling in something also creates extreme enjoyment. And we've spoken about engagement and enjoyment tonight. So this idea of creative testing and completely changing the way we assess our children. Because in one way, obviously, you want to protect them from that bad grade or that sort of approach. But then at the same time, is it unjust to not have them be confronted with tests? Because we have to prepare them for the real world where they're going to be confronted and tested in so many different shapes and forms.
Yeah, well, I prefer more authentic assessment because that's what you get in the real world. So not paper and pencil, but rather authentic assessment. So when should we test? We should test children when they're struggling in school. We should test to find out why kids that should appear to be bright are struggling, because that's where you find out about dyslexia, that's where you find out about autism, that's where you find out about other things that we can really make a difference about. We should test, and we should holistically assess what kids already know so we can eliminate content that they already know. So it's not that we're against various forms of assessment. We're just against standardization of learning that comes with standardized assessment. Because oftentimes, if we use standardized tests, we don't see what's unique and special and different and talented about a student. We see 79th percentile as opposed to you're special in this area. Our belief is that every child can be special if we create the conditions that enable them to develop their interests. So it's not that we don't believe in assessment. The types of assessment that I mentioned, we strongly believe in. We just don't believe that should be what governs most of education, because once you graduate, no matter how high you get, if it's your PhD, if it's your master's, and you finish that last assessment, most of life is going to be other kinds of more authentic assessment after that. How you do on a job, how you do professionally, how you do in the world, the kind of things you give back, etc. Did you want to add anything to that? All right. Well, great question.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to wrap up with one small thought. I think every change, every revolution, everything that we want to achieve always starts with an idea. And I think when an idea starts spreading, it can have immense power. I think every one of you that is here is sharing a similar idea and is sharing a similar view of how we could change education, how education could then change our society for the better. And I think I'd like to thank you first and foremost to be here, and I'd like to invite you now also that you've heard about the Schoolwide Enrichment Model to spread the word, because I was actually surprised how such a wonderful model. It is famous, it is known, but I guess maybe not enough, and we could do our part, every one of us, because I think it's so obvious, it's so evident And there is so many longitudinal studies that prove that. And I think when this idea grows and it becomes clear that this can actually be a solution, then I think we can really have systemic change. And if we have this systemic change, we can create something for all our children, for our future society, and for everyone else. So
great. Thank you.
I'd like to wrap up here, but maybe Joe and Sally are here a couple of minutes.
Of course,
absolutely. If you want to, ask a final question or something like that.
Right, that would be wonderful. We'd be happy to. And I just am hoping that Joe went to the restroom, that he turns his microphone off. That's what I want to say.
We'll turn off the microphone. Thank you for
You don't want